So next we have KV, who is an artist with a background in structural engineering. And as I was prepping and reading up about you, I became more and more fascinated about your story and your life. I think you embody so much of dualism in a way. So you're Chinese Vietnamese, but grew up in Canada, and you studied structural engineering and then transitioned to art full-time, self-taught.
Not full-time yet, but
yes. Self-taught artist. And in your art, you work on the theme of migration and the Vietnam War, kind of bring the past into the present. And now you're out as a gay man, but you were in the closet, so to speak, for about 28 years. So with all of this, I just thought, wow, like it's actually a lot embodied in one person. And I thought maybe we get to know you chronologically. Could you take us through how your parents came to Canada?
So we're ethnically Chinese, born in Vietnam. So even when we grew up, we weren't well off, but my parents had a private tutor to our what I call village. And as an adult, and when I spoke to them, they did that because they thought they were insulating us from the Vietnamese community, which is really weird because we spoke Vietnamese as a kid to the people, but then we had the teacher come teach us Vietnamese and Chinese. And the reason why they didn't want us to go in the public Vietnamese school was they didn't want to be discriminated. So already growing up, I found a form of discrimination which I didn't know about. So my parents lived through the war. Both parties survived. And then my aunts and uncle from both sides were both refugee people. My aunt's side, so my mom's side were in Singapore for a few months, and then my dad's side were in the Budang Island in Malaysia for a whole year before they relocated to Canada. And then in 1987, they sponsored us over to Canada. So I grew up with a Western upbringing, and then of course they were electricians and like homemaker, and then they just worked in the factory for the rest of their adult life. They're both retired now. My aunts were hair salon barbershop, so they did that in Canada. So we grew up, I guess in our community we assimilated to the Chinese community in Toronto. So then I lost my Vietnamese and I speak Cantonese to my parents. So there's already this, like, am I Chinese or am I Vietnamese? Actually I'm Canadian, but then and then
all three.
Yeah, so now you're British. So when someone asks me what am I, it's really confusing. It's almost like Shen asked me what art do you do. That's also really confusing because you do a lot of things, and I think everyone here, we have such a diverse background to explain what we are, and then we're also queer. I don't remember what the question was.
You were actually answering the question I was going to ask you next. It was like if you ever had that internal conflict with your identity in terms of Vietnamese or Canadian and Cantonese, and I think you said you're kind of each of them and all of them at once, and we, again, like just so much diversity within you and within us as well. What brought you to London?
So we, I guess with most Asian people, we weren't able to study like fashion or art, unless you're already from a well-off family who can support that. So I studied structural engineering, my siblings studied arts and science and kinesiology, so both of my sister and brother are both teachers. So I studied engineering, which gave me the visa to come to the UK. This was 12 years ago. I think for me, coming as a gay person or a queer person, it was like, do you live in Toronto for the rest of your life because that's where your family happened to be? And I said, well, actually I have the freedom to pick, to choose. So I came on a 2-year working holiday visa, and then I loved it so much, and then I stayed. So this is like home. the transition to art, I think, because we don't have, I wouldn't say burden, but the social obligation of having kids, we can explore our passions more, because it's quite difficult if you, I know with my siblings and other people who are creatives, if you have kids, you almost have to put your second career on hold. So it's been 6 years going through this transition of becoming an artist. So that's I think it's like David, studying architecture for your parents, and you eventually want to do something that really is your passion.
Yeah, you first do it for them and then do it for yourself.
Yeah.
Cool. When did you realize that you wanted to explore more of the art side of you?
I think doing art in high school as well, the equivalent of A-levels, and then you thought, okay, well, I don't actually need to study art, do I? Actually, you do, but then, when you're 18, 19, you study the proper work, because you can't really self-teach engineering. I don't think so anyway. Of course you can, but it's quite difficult to do that. So, okay, maybe and then so that was like the default, but it was always in me to do. And I think I stayed in the closet for so long, and my social peer circle was like people from high school who were mostly Asian, but Caucasians as well, but they are of a professional background, and then you do engineering for 6 years, and then you work, so your peer circle is a bit boring. And then I came out, and then I realized there are so many alternative professions that make a living. This sounds really dumb, but I don't actually understand what people outside of lawyer, doctor, engineer do. Like my partner is a client director. So having that exposure to the community gives you more accessibility to learn what the options are.
Yeah, and amidst all of this, when did you really come out to yourself, and did you realize that you were gay?
I was 13, and my brother was flipping through channels, and it was like a bodybuilding competition. It's like, something is happening now. And then you flip it up, and you flip back. It's like, so I was like, this is weird. But when I was 8, 9, I played with my neighbors. We were playing with Barbie dolls. I played G.I. Joe and stuff too. But sorry, these are very like traditional era, So it was then, and then the good thing about being in a very traditional Asian family is that they don't want you to date until you have an education. So I was insulated in that way to just study, and then suddenly I was 24 and finished my master's degree. Okay, you can date now. I'm like, thanks. So this is just pre-smartphone days, so it was very difficult to access who was around. So I didn't actually know many gay people at all, because in Toronto it's similar to London or major cities actually. The equivalent of Chinatown, Oxford Street and Old Compton Street was all within like a kilometer from each other. So when you're closeted pre-iPhone, you're walking around, it's like, who am I going to meet? Like, you're going to be outed, and this is like yourself before having having income. Like, you don't want to get disowned, right? So that took me a long time to sort of face that. So my first experience was actually when I was 24, when I went to Ottawa for a conference, and that was like my first time like being away from the chains of your family. So that's when I started exploring. I did schooling at the University of Toronto, so I didn't have that outlet as well of going to boarding school. So it took a while to understand, to have the stability of finance, and then finally coming out. So I came out at 28 to my closest friends and then my siblings, and then I moved to London when I was 30, and then when I went back to Canada to renew my visa at 32, that's when I came out to my parents. I think by that point I had one nephew. There's like 4 nieces and a nephew now. So that really helps to alleviate the pressure, because there's already like an offspring.
The family line's already been.
Even though it was my sisters, kid. But still, at least there's like a grandkid in the family.
How did your parents take it? How did your family take it?
I think to date, it's still the most difficult thing that I've had to do in my life is to come out to my parents. And I know a lot of my friends, Asian friends particularly, they don't officially come out to their family. Sometimes they just live with someone and then they just like, I've been living with X, Y. And then they come to your family gather. So it's just kind of like an unsaid thing. I think for me, I needed to say it. My dad actually took it really well. I think he grieved on his own. My mom cried a lot, but eventually I left after 2 months of the visa renewal, and then my siblings sort of took care of it. But we're all good now. So they have met my partner. We've stayed with each other, and then the kids love him, which helps with. If you ever need to bring a partner to your family, just get the kids to like him or her.
I'll write that down. And how does that show up in your work? How does that inspire you in terms of like working on art pieces?
I think as a self-taught artist, you have no rules, or you don't know of the rules to break. And I guess it's like if you're a singer-songwriter, you write about your experience. So for me, initially I was doing art about the migration experience, and the more I do it, the more I realize that the experience is quite unique of living in 3 distinct continents, but having all of these racial assimilation issues that is quite global regardless of the color of your hair or skin. And then also being a queer artist, so it's like a niche and then another niche over it. I think that if I had to look back at my younger self 20 years ago, I wish I had met someone like myself to have a role model. It's really important to be visible, just like Queer Britain here, like to be seen. This is for the queer community in the UK, to have representation of Asian people as doctors, lawyers, or in the artists, or whatever we're doing in this platform. I think it's really important. We don't know who we're affecting or influencing, but it's important to have that legacy so that people can reach out to us after the event to know that we exist.
Yeah, and I think so. When I went to the Queer Frontiers event that you curated and hosted, I said to you at the time as well, just even seeing your name, like a very East and Southeast Asian name on the wall, for me, like that provides so much comfort for me. So definitely, I think it does make a massive difference. So, how did you find the experience being someone who's queer and from Vietnam, growing up in Canada, breaking into the art industry? Was it a barrier, or was it less so in the art industry?
I think we, as a Southeast Asian community, have a lot to learn from the Black community. And I say that with the greatest respect that, with the Black Lives Matter movement, it really raised their voice and strength. For better or for worse, it took the murders of many people to bring that uprising. So being in the position of a curator and in the art world and just listening, when you're curating or brief in the exhibition that I helped to co-curate with Queer Frontiers, like LGBTQ+, we needed to have all of those aspects of that spectrum represented, which is very important to raise that visibility, but also a balance of female and male identifying and non-binary people. But the most important was like the racial diversity. And when, I don't know if you filled applications of BAME, it's like, it's now called global majority, but like it's the British Asian minorities. It's my experience, like they really say bang, but then what they mean is black. And I think it's because the voice of the black community is very strong. So when you have an exhibition, let's say, of all male, all white, let's say you have 4 male white, people will be like, what is this exhibition? If you have 4 female, that is socially acceptable because we're trying to change the gender gap. But when you have even, like if you have a female black artist on the board, it makes it accessible. And I wonder if that's because their voice is very strong. So what I'm trying to say is there a way we can make the Southeast Asian voice stronger? So to answer your question, the barrier of, I don't know if it's being queer because it's niche, but I think being Asian, I find it a bit more difficult because there are not as many Asian curators and gallerists versus Caucasian gallerists. So it's a visibility and representation. And when I say back to the black community, they're really good at supporting each other and patrons supporting black artists. I don't know if that's really the case for the Asian community because you get Chinese collectors who are just collecting. I say this, just not very experienced with it, but my perception is they're buying art to whatever raises in commodity, and so they're less focused about race, and they're supporting their own people. Of course, there are people who support, and when you put the queer narrative, it's so censored in China that I don't know how much you can bounce that as well. And same with Vietnam, it's censored not as strict as in China, but the black community, they are really good at supporting each other, and that's something I think that we can learn.
Yeah, I agree. I actually discussed something similar with quite a few people who are ASEAs as well. And I think we're not really loud in terms of the way we do things and who we are generally, and I think that's to do with our generational upbringing. We're kind of taught that you have to be modest, you have to be humble, you have to have humility, and I think sometimes it's hard for us to speak out in a group or be loud and shout at the top of our lungs that we want equality and we want to be recognized. And I think it kind of filters through in various different industries. So I definitely agree. I don't know, apart from doing more sort of events like this and having more community activities and events and getting the awareness out there, because I also don't think we have to change who we are ourselves. So it's definitely a struggle, I think. And I was actually thinking about this over the last couple of days. So a lot of corporate entities, what they have is during, they have a Pride Week, not necessarily a Pride Month, and they do show queer art. But often, as you say, they're kind of either Caucasian or black artists. And I think that's what I want to do as the next step, maybe for artists in particular, maybe to get these organizations to show more and to display more, and for people to hear these names and not be scared of saying our names. I think if you go by your Asian name, I think for many of us, when we say it, you almost see the fear in their faces, like, how do I say that? I don't want to pronounce it wrong. But maybe we just need to get it more out there so that they're used to it. And I guess the next question is, where do you draw your inspiration from in the art space? What inspires you for your art?
I think this is going very specifically into my practice. I think trained as a structural engineer for 6 years and then being in the industry for another 17 years, it's many years of your life doing engineering and understanding how materials work. So in my art practice, a lot of it is material based, even paintings of how the texture and the color bounces off that in sculptures of how the material is used, of using carbon fiber or concrete. In installation, so I did a stools installation with a Vietnamese collaborator in May, where we stacked white plastic stools to make a constellation of almost like the back streets of Vietnam or China, where we gather to have beer. So, but there's an architectural and space aesthetics that is from the engineer training. So a lot of my influence of material and visual is from that part. The narrative is speaking to other people in the queer community, in the Asian community, to understand their story. And just like having this talk here, it's talking about our personal story, but I think it's just as important for everyone to share their experience as well. So when we were, so the topics of migration, I'm speaking specifically about my story and my family, how we got to Canada from Vietnam. But it's very relevant also to the migrant crisis now, and just wherever you are, having the queer voice suppression, of course, in our community, is much more taboo. But we're all living now in England, where we have the freedom of speech. So the topics of queer and being visible, I'm aware that there are other countries, and still in the British colony, where it's illegal to be gay or queer. So part of creating my own personal story and then making it more general and accessible to the wider queer community, not just Asian community, I think that's really important to have that be visible.
As the general public, what can we do to support you in that as well, as an artist and as someone who's willing to share?
I think after the talk, I was going to suggest that we just go around the room, if you're comfortable, to just say, hi, my name is KV, I'm Chinese, Vietnamese, Canadian, I am an artist and a structural engineer. I think part of meeting people here is to have the future connection. So not just specifically to, of course, if you know people who like Asian, I would say Asian art, who like art that deals with migration and queer study, then please pass them to me. But just as important for each other here, like we're staying around, and so even if you're Caucasian, you're looking at people who you're comfortable with, and it's really important to start building the network. So for a long time, I didn't feel comfortable saying that I'm Vietnamese. It's like, I don't know if you know the Joy Luck Club, and when Amy Tan went to China, she's like, oh, I felt like home. When I went to China, I felt like a foreigner because I don't speak Mandarin, I speak Cantonese, so Hong Kong was fine. And when I was in mainland China, I was like, who the hell are you? I tried sign language with them as well. I was like, where's the washroom? I tried the sign language, and they're like, what? This was 2007, maybe it's changed now. So when I went back to Vietnam in 2010, I felt much more at home with I wouldn't say language, because I don't really speak it anymore. And it wasn't until this past Christmas where I learned that the migration story of ethnically Chinese people in Vietnam is a part of that Vietnamese diaspora. So I really own to say that I am Vietnamese, Chinese, Canadian, and British. Yeah. So just going back, what I was trying to say is this Vietnamese narrative in my practice, it's really taken like a snowball in the last 8 to 10 months. And it's thanks a lot to Dan in the corner there, who's connected me to a lot of Vietnamese creatives in London. So I had an exhibition at the Migration Museum in Lewisham in April, and that, for the first time, there were like 50 people, and there were 2 solos at the same time with a British Indian artist, but it was really nice to meet Vietnamese creatives, queer or not queer, and their social circle. So it felt like, wow, this is like your tribe. And then when we did this Doors installation with a French Vietnamese artist, Hoa, again, we had a space where a lot of Vietnamese and Southeast Asian people came to gather, and it was like a bubble effect. So I think for the organization to look around now to start that communication to build future networks and events.
Yeah, I think actually in Lewisham is probably an ideal place for that as well, because I think as part of the refugee stats, I think it's like 20,000 Vietnamese refugees came to Deptford, Hackney, and nearby areas. Yeah. So you actually see a lot of Vietnamese restaurants and shops there, and then obviously there's goldsmiths nearby. So actually it's a very good crossing of the different communities.
Yeah. I mean, even seeing the faces here, I don't know everyone, but I know that, you know, this person should meet that person, because I know that there are similarities where you can help each other in your respective careers and interests.
Yeah, and yesterday I saw your Instagram post where you posted in your art, and you had a very heartfelt description where you felt this drive and hunger to achieve success and, you know, achieve your goals. So what would you like to achieve in the next 5-10 years?
I call period, regardless of your race, gender. Kind of stopped. The ambition, of course, is to quit engineering and do art full time, but it's really difficult because just for example, if you sell something for £1,000, there's probably £200 from the material, and this is like excluding time. That piece that you sold for £1,000, there's like 5 pieces that are not sold, and there's probably another 2 or 3 pieces that get blanked out, and then you are the artist, social media, PR, blah blah blah, everything. So the time that you spend, where does it go? It's free, isn't it? And I think the struggle that I have is when you meet friends, because I'm still a structural engineer. Oh, can you do that for me for free? Or like give me a heavy discount. Like, you don't understand if you have to break away. So I would say support your creative friends, like pay them what they deserve, as though you were hiring someone to do your marketing or interior design for you.
Yeah.
I mean, unless they're doing it for free as a hobby, that's fine. But if someone is trying to transition into a career, we have to support the arts.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges as well is because of the price tag on it, it's kind of not as accessible to the everyday people who are not earning a large sum of money. So the barrier of access is actually quite high, and then for people to understand and relate to the art as well, and the exposure that comes from it is an incredibly difficult industry.
Yeah.
So
it's a niche market because people save up to buy a Louis Vuitton bag, but because you can think of just buying something for IKEA, but then of course if you educate them, and of course there are art patrons, but it's definitely already a niche market. But the reward that you get from connecting with something that I'm not saying that you don't connect with your bag as well, but there's a different conversation when you have someone over and you're discussing that part of the intellect, which we're trying to open these doors, and this is part of educating people as well.
yeah. I think in your work, I don't know that much about art at all, but I see a lot of passion and strength and, you know, very strong emotions. And then I came across your performance art on white sheet, and, you know, how did you get into performance art?
I think that, you know, I would say that I feel very comfortable in my skin, and it's a process that not everyone gets to, regardless of your sexuality or race. And for me, it was like being very outgoing as a kid, and then I shrunk into this, like, you know, it's like the opposite. You don't move so much so that you don't get caught out being gay. And it wasn't until I came out so late as well, I was just like, fuck this, like I don't care anymore. So then the original personality came back. So it came from someone who was very self-conscious of their movement and hearing their voice on the answering machines. Like, God, of course this person is gay. How did my parents not know, right? So to being very comfortable in your skin, the performance aspect came from just going to the Venice Biennale in 2017 and seeing this series of photographs by a Hungarian photographer, performance artist, Tibor Hadjas. He's a straight male, but he was taking photographs about the Russian suppression, and it was just something that triggered my mind to allowed me the agency and voice to do the set of work. So I went home. It's like the size. You move out your sofa. You have your friend with the iPhone 4. It was like a crap iPhone, and then with the sheet, and we just took some photographs and I edited, and then I pitched it to a curator who had an open call, and so okay, here's the set of photographs. Oh, that's really good. Like do it on the opening night. Like, what do you mean? Like, this is it? It's like, no, perform it. What? So it was like 2 months, and then I said, let me think about it. I'm not sure. Let me take 24 hours to think about this. And I went home and said, of course, you're going to take up this opportunity. So it just, again, being self-taught, there are no rules to break because you don't know the rules, so you just do it. And it's been, December 2017 was the first one, and I've done one or two every year since. So it's like a process and progress of learning and just experimenting.
Do you want to do more of it in the future?
I do, but it's access, because you need a venue and you need time to think about it. It's like if someone says, oh, you've done a hit album, can you do another one in 2 months? It's really hard to do that. So when you do paintings and sculptures, they're like little tracks, but to do a performance is like doing a whole album, so you don't have the mental space to do that. But also in the artist category, that I'm not getting paid for the performances, also a lot of time and money investment in that to build the portfolio. But yeah, I think if you had more opportunities to get paid to do more of these, then it would take off in another direction.
And what are you working on now? Do you have any upcoming shows and exhibitions?
Yeah, so there's a group show at the Contemporary in Mayfair opening September the 6th. Everyone's invited. So that's with 5 artists, and then so that's why I'm painting so heavily the last few weeks. And then there's an exhibition in Woodstock, which is outside of Oxford at the end of October. And that's a 3-person exhibition at a gallery space as well.
If you guys are free. Thank you, KV.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone's attention and for being here as well.
And I think we should give KV a round of applause. And take up on this idea of actually introducing who we are and what do we do. And also, I also want to hear from people, if you have an idea as to like what you want to see more of, or what do you think is currently missing in this circle, let me know, let us know, let each other know, and then we can see if there's something that we can help each other with.
If you feel shy, just prefer to just say pass.
Yeah.